Alex Ward had always found space travel to be a strange, almost surreal experience. After years of serving as a human diplomat for the Galactic Federation, he had gotten used to the idea of meeting alien species from all over the galaxy. But today, in the lush halls of the Virelian Research Facility, he was about to face something that would make him rethink his entire perspective on diplomacy. He had arrived on Vireles, a planet known for its advanced genetics research and its meticulous, almost obsessive, focus on understanding biology. The Virelians were an intelligent, peaceful species who had long been part of the Federation, but their curiosity about humanity was something Alex had never quite anticipated. Alex Ward, human ambassador, he muttered to himself under his breath, trying to ease the tension. He adjusted his jacket and walked toward the designated meeting area. As he entered the large hall, he was greeted by the sight of Tishira, the Virelian researcher who had been assigned to guide him during his stay. She was tall, with sharp features and sleek metallic skin that glinted in the soft light of the room. Her eyes, bright and inquisitive, seemed to pierce right through him. "Ambassador Ward," she said with a polite but cool tone, "welcome to Vireles." "Thank you," Alex replied, shaking her hand. There was a slight warmth in his voice, though he couldn't shake the feeling that her interest in him was more than just professional. Tishira was known for her keen curiosity about human physiology, and it seemed that today she was intent on learning everything she could. Tishira led him through a series of narrow, high-tech hallways, filled with holographic displays and transparent observation panels that overlooked vast laboratories. It was clear that the Virelians were at the forefront of scientific discovery, particularly in the field of genetics. But as they walked, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being examined from every angle. Tishira's gaze was focused, intent, as if she were sizing him up in a way that made him feel more like a specimen than a diplomat. "Tell me, Ambassador," Tishira said, breaking the silence. "I've read much about human physiology. The fact that your species can produce milk, something no other species in this federation can do, is particularly interesting to me." Alex froze, feeling the blood rush to his face. The question, though blunt, was not unexpected. He had been briefed on the Virelians' fascination with human biology. Still, the directness of Tishira's inquiry made him uncomfortable. "Yes, it's true," Alex replied cautiously, "but it's not something we usually talk about." Tishira's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Why is that? Is it a private matter for your species?" "No, not exactly," Alex said, his voice a little less steady than he intended. "It's just not something that comes up in everyday conversation." "Fascinating," Tishira muttered to herself as they continued walking. She seemed to be lost in thought for a moment before turning back to him. "You see, on our planet, males do not produce milk. We Virelians have a completely different way of nurturing our young." Alex nodded, trying to understand her perspective. "I see. So you're more interested in how human males produce milk?" Tishira's expression brightened. "Exactly. It's a biological anomaly to us. We have studied other species, but nothing like your kind." Before Alex could respond, Tishira abruptly stopped in front of a door, which slid open automatically, revealing a small, sterile laboratory filled with medical equipment. It looked like something out of a futuristic science fiction movie. "This is where the real work happens," Tishira said, her voice almost giddy. "I think it's time we get to the heart of this mystery, don't you?" Alex blinked. "Wait, what do you mean by?" Before he could finish his sentence, Tishira had already stepped inside the lab, gesturing for him to follow. Reluctantly, Alex stepped into the room, feeling his discomfort grow with every passing second. He had been expecting discussions on intergalactic diplomacy, perhaps even a few light-hearted exchanges about their cultures. But this was something entirely different. The lab was filled with various devices, most of them unfamiliar to Alex. Screens flickered with data, while strange, glowing tools rested on countertops. Tishira walked to one of the tables, where a strange device was mounted. It looked like some sort of scanner. "Please, Ambassador, if you don't mind," Tishira said, turning to face him with an almost mischievous smile. "I need to conduct a small experiment. Nothing invasive, of course. Just a quick test to better understand your unique biology." Alex raised an eyebrow, his nerves starting to take over. "What kind of test?" "It's simple," Tishira replied, her tone soothing yet firm. "I need to observe how your body responds to a few minor stimuli. We Virelians believe in understanding the full scope of a species before attempting any sort of long-term alliance." Despite the polite tone, Alex could sense the underlying urgency in Tishira's voice. It was almost as if this wasn't just a scientific curiosity, it was something far more important to her. Still, he couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. "I'm not sure about this," Alex said, his voice tight. "I came here to discuss diplomacy, not to be part of a medical experiment." Tishira stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, and her expression softened. "I understand your hesitation. But I assure you, Ambassador, this will only help us understand your species better. This knowledge could be invaluable for the future of our people." Alex hesitated. He knew that this wasn't just about his body. It was about his people, his species, and the future of human-Virelian relations. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pushed into something he wasn't entirely comfortable with. I suppose I don't have much of a choice," Alex said finally, his voice resigned. "Good," Tishira said, her smile returning. She moved to the console and activated a series of holographic screens. "This will only take a moment." As the scanner began to hum and whir, Alex felt a chill run down his spine. The room felt colder than before, and the hum of the equipment seemed to intensify. He glanced over at Tishira, who was now fully absorbed in the data on the screens. Alex took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. This wasn't what he had imagined when he agreed to be a diplomat. This wasn't what he had prepared for. But as Tishira turned toward him with an excited expression, he couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of discomfort and curiosity. What exactly was she hoping to learn? And more importantly, was he ready to give her the answers she sought? Tishira's voice broke through his thoughts. "Please remove your jacket and shirt, Ambassador. The scan will be more accurate that way." Alex hesitated for a moment, feeling his face flush once more. This was getting more personal than he had anticipated. But he knew he had little choice now. Reluctantly, he began to remove his jacket, trying to keep his composure. He could hear Tishira's soft murmurs of excitement as she adjusted the settings on the scanner. It was clear that this was more than just a simple scientific experiment to her. As the last of his clothing came off, Alex felt a sense of vulnerability wash over him. He wasn't sure why, but he felt exposed, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Tishira's curiosity had pushed him into a position where he no longer felt in control, and though he had agreed to it, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. The scanner came to life, bathing his body in a soft blue light. Tishira moved around him, her eyes fixed on the screen. Alex could feel her gaze on him, studying every inch of his body, every reaction. It felt like a violation in some way, though he knew it wasn't her intent. After what seemed like an eternity, Tishira finally stopped. She looked up at him, her face bright with excitement. "Fascinating," she said softly. "Absolutely fascinating." Alex, still feeling uneasy, asked, "What did you learn?" Tishira looked at him, her expression a mixture of awe and respect. "You humans, you're not just biological marvels, you're full of surprises." This discovery, this is just the beginning. Though Alex had no idea what she meant, one thing was clear. Their encounter had just begun, and it was going to be more complicated than he could have ever imagined. After the unsettling experience in the lab, Alex could not shake the feeling that his relationship with Tishira, the Violian researcher, had shifted in a way he wasn't fully prepared for. While he had come to Violes to negotiate intergalactic relations, he never expected to become the subject of scientific study. The following days were filled with formal meetings, and yet, each time he met with Tishira, he felt that strange tension lingering in the air. It wasn't just diplomacy anymore. It was something more personal, almost intimate in its curiosity. Alex had hoped that the awkwardness would fade with time, but Tishira's constant questions about human biology only seemed to deepen the divide between them. She had become obsessed with understanding the intricacies of human physiology, particularly the male body's ability to produce milk. Alex had never thought much about it before, but Tishira's endless inquiries had made him aware of just how unique and potentially uncomfortable the subject was. "Ambassador, I've been thinking," Tishira said one evening, her voice more serious than usual. They were sitting across from each other in a high-rise lounge overlooking the city. The lights of Violes twinkled below, reflecting the tranquil atmosphere of the planet. "I believe I have underestimated the complexity of human biology. Your species' ability to adapt, to survive in harsh environments, and even to nurture in ways we've never understood, these are qualities that demand respect." Alex listened carefully, taking a sip of the drink that had been placed in front of him. He wasn't entirely sure what Tishira was getting at, but her tone seemed different, more reflective, less clinical. It was as though she was coming to a realization about humanity that she hadn't expected. Tishira continued, "What I mean is your biology. It's not just about the ability to produce milk. There's something deeper, something more profound. The way your species has evolved, how you've learned to care for your young, to protect each other, it's remarkable." Alex frowned slightly, unsure how to respond. He had never thought about his species' biology in such a grandiose way. To him, it was just biology. It was science. But Tishira's words made him consider something he hadn't before. Maybe the human way of nurturing was indeed unique in the galaxy. "I never thought of it that way," Alex said slowly. "To us, it's just normal, but I suppose from your perspective it does seem unusual." Tishira's eyes brightened and she leaned forward. "Exactly. For us, nurturing is something that is inherently tied to our females. Our species has a strict division of labor, and the roles of males and females are well defined. But you humans, you blur that line. You break the mold, and that's something I find intriguing." Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He didn't know what to make of her words. Was she complimenting humanity, or was she just making an observation? "I've been studying the scans we took in the lab," Tishira continued, her voice low. "And I've discovered something. Your species' ability to produce milk, while remarkable, is only the beginning. There's a deeper connection between your biology and your society, one that I didn't see before." Alex felt his heart rate increase. "What do you mean?" Tishira looked directly at him, her gaze intense. "I've been thinking about what it means to be human. And I believe that your ability to nurture, to care for others, has shaped your culture in ways I can't even begin to understand. You don't just survive, Ambassador. You thrive. You build communities. You support one another. And that is something the Violean species, for all our intelligence and advancements, has lost." Alex was stunned. Tishira had always been direct, but now there was something almost vulnerable in her tone. It was as if she was grappling with something larger than herself, something her species had never considered. "What are you saying?" Alex asked softly. He had never expected this kind of conversation. He had thought they were here to discuss the future of human-Violean relations, not to delve into the deep philosophy of human existence. "I'm saying that maybe there's more to humanity than I ever gave you credit for," Tishira replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I've spent so much time focusing on the biological aspects, the science, but now I realize that it's not just about the milk. It's about how you care for each other. It's about the emotional bonds you create. That's something we've lost. We've evolved beyond those needs, focusing only on intellect and survival. But your species, is built on something else. Alex felt a strange sense of warmth flood through him. It was not something he had ever felt in diplomatic conversations, certainly not in discussions about science or biology. But Tishira's words struck a chord with him. He had never really thought about the deeper meaning of human nurturing, of what it meant to care for someone outside of simple necessity. He had always taken it for granted, but Tishira had opened his eyes to something far more profound. "You're right," Alex said after a pause. "We're not just surviving, we're living. We connect with each other in ways that go beyond biology. It's part of what makes us human." Tishira smiled faintly, a look of admiration in her eyes. "I can see that now, and it's something I think my people need to learn. Perhaps there is something to be gained from understanding your species' approach to life." The conversation lingered in Alex's mind long after it had ended. Tishira's words had changed something in him, something deep. He had never considered that his species' ability to care for one another, to nurture, could be a key factor in how the rest of the galaxy saw humanity. It was a revelation that left him both humbled and proud. As the days passed, the negotiations between humanity and the Virelians continued. Tishira was no longer just the scientist and Alex the diplomat. There was a subtle shift in their dynamic, a newfound respect for one another that went beyond the scientific and political. Alex began to look at Tishira differently. She wasn't just a researcher obsessed with human biology. She was someone who had come to understand humanity in a way that few others had. One evening, as the two of them sat in the same high-rise lounge overlooking the Virelian city, Alex found himself reflecting on the changes in his own thinking. He had come to Vireles to represent humanity, to make an alliance with the Virelian people. But he had ended up learning something about his own species, something he had never fully appreciated before. "Tishira," Alex began, "I never expected this trip to go the way it has. I thought I was here to discuss trade, technology, politics. But instead, you've helped me see humanity in a whole new light." Tishira looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I suppose I've learned a lot from you as well, Ambassador. There's more to your species than I first thought, and it's not just the biology that makes you unique. It's the way you live, the way you connect with each other." Alex smiled. "I guess we're not so different after all." Tishira smiled back, a warm, knowing smile. "Perhaps not. Perhaps, in the end, it's our shared understanding of what it means to care for others that will bridge the gap between our species." As the days went by, the bond between Alex and Tishira deepened. The negotiation was still ongoing, but there was a sense of mutual respect, an understanding that neither of them had expected. They both knew that the future of their peoples depended on more than just technology and trade. It depended on their ability to understand one another, not just as diplomats or scientists, but as beings who shared a deep, fundamental need to connect, to care, and to live. And while the future of human-Virelian relations was still uncertain, Alex couldn't help but feel that, in some small way, the true victory had already been won. It wasn't the treaties or the agreements that would define this mission. It was the connection they had forged, the understanding that had blossomed between them, that would shape the future of both their species. In the quiet of the evening, with the lights of Vireles twinkling below, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. The galaxy was vast, filled with species of all shapes and sizes, each with their own histories, their own cultures, their own ways of living. But in the end, perhaps the most important thing was what Tishira had shown him, the ability to nurture, to care, to live not just for oneself, but for the others who shared this universe. And it was that understanding that, in the end, would bring the galaxy closer together. The days on Virales were beginning to blur into one another. After the discussions and diplomatic meetings, Alex had grown accustomed to Tishira's presence. What began as a professional relationship had now blossomed into something deeper, something that Alex wasn't sure how to categorize. Tishira was no longer just the scientist studying human biology. She was becoming a friend, someone who had helped him see humanity in a light he had never fully understood before. The ongoing negotiations were still crucial, but the weight of their personal connection had begun to overshadow the official talks. It wasn't that they were avoiding their duties, far from it. But each time Alex and Tishira met, they couldn't help but discuss more than just the treaty terms. They discussed their cultures, their species, and the ways in which their differences could be bridged for the future. But no matter how much they connected on a personal level, there were still larger matters at hand. Humanity's place within the Galactic Federation was not a simple one, and the Virelian people had a deep-rooted need for understanding before they could fully commit to an alliance. There was still work to be done, diplomatically and personally. It was the third evening of their talks when Tishira brought up the subject of the treaty again. They sat in the same lounge where they had shared their previous conversation, the city lights still twinkling beneath them. Tishira looked more serious now, her expression a little more solemn than usual. "Ambassador," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I think it's time we address the most important issue, our people's future." Alex leaned forward, his heart rate quickening. He had been expecting this moment, but it still felt like a huge weight hanging over him. "You mean the treaty?" Tishira nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Yes, the treaty, but also more than that. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, the connection between your species and our species. It's not just about science or technology. It's about values. It's about understanding." Alex felt a sense of pride rise within him, hearing Tishira speak with such conviction. "You're right. It's about understanding. If we're going to move forward, we need to find common ground in more than just our systems of government or military strategy. We need to find it in the way we live, the way we relate to one another." Tishira looked thoughtful, as though she was weighing her next words carefully. "And that's what I've been struggling with. The Virelian people have always been a species that values intellect, progress, and efficiency. But you, humans, you're different. You value connection, community, and empathy. That's something we've lost over time." Alex's expression softened. He had always known that humanity's way of life wasn't perfect, but hearing Tishira acknowledge it felt like a victory, not for him, but for all of humanity. The way they cared for each other, the way they nurtured their communities, was finally being seen as something valuable by another species. "I think it's time for the Virelian people to look beyond just efficiency," Tishira continued, her voice steady. "We've spent so long focusing on intellect and progress, but we've neglected the emotional side of life. Maybe it's time we learned from you." Alex was quiet for a moment, taking in her words. "I don't think it's about learning from one another in the traditional sense. It's more about bringing our strengths together. We might approach things differently, but I think that's what makes us strong." Tishira gave him a small smile. "You're right. Our species is not perfect and neither is yours. But together, we can create something that neither of us could do alone." The conversation shifted as the night went on, with Tishira and Alex discussing the details of the treaty. They spoke of shared research projects, collaborative trade agreements, and the possibility of merging their technology with human innovation. But there was always an underlying sense of something deeper at play. This treaty, while important, was not the only thing on their minds. For Alex, it was clear that the bond between humans and Virelians was no longer just about politics or trade. It was about building something more meaningful, something lasting. The emotional connections that Tishira had brought to light were starting to take root in the negotiations. making everything feel more personal, more real. The next day, Tishira invited Alex to visit one of the Violian research centers, where they studied human biology in greater depth. This wasn't just about scanning Alex for scientific data anymore. This was about understanding humanity in a way that went beyond surface-level biology. Alex walked through the facility, noticing how much it had changed since his first visit. The sterile, cold halls were now filled with more warmth, with holographic displays showing not just biological data but also aspects of human culture, art, music, family life. Tishira had spent hours working on ways to integrate human values into their research, and it was beginning to show. "This is impressive," Alex said, looking around at the new displays. "I never thought I'd see a Violian research lab focusing on our culture like this." Tishira smiled as she led him deeper into the facility. "It's not just about biology anymore, Alex. It's about understanding everything that makes your species unique. The emotional connections, the values that bind you together. I think we've been so focused on logic that we forgot the heart of what makes life worth living." They stopped in front of a large, interactive display showing a hologram of a human family. The father was holding a child, while the mother stood nearby, looking on with a sense of love and pride. It was a simple scene, but it spoke volumes. "This is what we want to understand," Tishira said, her voice quiet but full of emotion. "The strength of your families. The way you bond with one another. It's something we've lost, but something we're starting to see the value in." Alex looked at the hologram, his thoughts drifting back to his own family. It had been years since he had seen his parents or siblings. The demands of his diplomatic work had always come first, but in that moment he realized just how important those familial bonds were to him. It wasn't about politics or even about his work. It was about the people who mattered most. "You're right," Alex said quietly. "The emotional bonds are what make us human. We've always relied on each other, and that's what has kept us going. It's not about being perfect. It's about being there for each other, even when times are tough." Tishira nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I think that's what makes humans so unique. You're not afraid to rely on one another. You don't have to be strong all the time. You lean on your families, your friends, your communities. That's something we could learn from." Alex smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "Maybe that's the key to this alliance. Not just the technology or the trade, but the emotional connection. If we can understand each other on a deeper level, then maybe we can build something that lasts." Later that evening, Alex and Tishira sat down to finalize the treaty. The atmosphere between them had shifted once again. It wasn't just about the formalities anymore. It was about creating a future where their species could thrive together. As they went over the terms of the treaty, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. "I think we're ready," Tishira said, her voice steady. "Not just for this treaty, but for a new kind of relationship between our species. One built on mutual respect, understanding, and the willingness to learn from one another." Alex nodded, his heart filled with a sense of pride. "Agreed. We've come a long way, and I think we're just getting started." The treaty was signed the following day, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between humanity and the Violian species. But for Alex, the true victory wasn't in the ink on the paper. It was in the deeper understanding they had forged. The emotional connection, the recognition of the value in their differences. It was that understanding that would shape the future of their alliance. As he left the Violian capital, Alex reflected on everything he had learned. The future wasn't just about technology or power. It was about the bonds that held them all together, human, Violian, and every species in between. And with that realization, Alex knew that the future was bright, not because of what they had accomplished, but because of the understanding they had shared.